You're looking at a cross-section diagram of the female reproductive system. To the left of your screen, you're going to notice that's where the front of the animal would be, and to the right of the screen would be the rear. Naturally, the backbone is toward the upper part of the screen, with the lower part being near the bottom. Some of the features that we're going to point out today, and we're going to work from the inner parts of the animal out, would be the ovary. We're going to talk about that shortly. The infundibulum, the uterine body, uterine horn. Now, it's going to be different in some species of livestock, and we'll talk about that more in detail a little bit later. The uterus itself, the cervix, vagina with bladder, and vulva or external genitalia. Some of the species that we'll look at will be very similar in the way that the structure is put together. Poultry is in a whole different category on its own, and we'll discuss that later in the course. The system here, other than size and shape, are very similar to the human female anatomy as well. Looking at the female reproductive tract, what is the purpose of the ovary? The ovary is comparable to the testicle in the male, and that's where gamete production, gamete being the egg, and that's where that part of the animal is produced. All species of livestock have two functioning ovaries, except for the chicken, where the hen only has the left functioning ovary. One of the things that is very neat or interesting is that a bovine or cow has 20,000 potential eggs per ovary. Now, with two ovaries, that's a number of eggs possible. Naturally, you're not going to use those through its lifetime, but there are many eggs available for that animal to have the chance to reproduce. Now, you compare that with a human female, there's 400,000 potential eggs per ovary times 2. That's 800,000 potential pregnancies in that animal, which is an extreme number of chances of reproduction. Female reproductive system, here we're looking at the ovaries from a mare, from a female horse. One of the things that I want to point out is the corpus luteum. That is one of the areas of the ovary which the follicle develops, ruptures, and the egg is released. The corpus luteum is what remains after the release of that egg from the ovary through the cycle. Ovaries have a couple of major functions. As we discussed earlier, gamete production, the production of the egg. In addition to that, it also secretes the hormones, the chemicals in the body that helps the female, act like a female. The absence of muscle development, development of the mammary tissue in the body, development of external genitalia, the unfortunate placing of fat on the hips and stomach in the human, but a very important process in animals, triggering of heat or triggering of the animal being able to breed. In addition to the functions of the ovary that we've just mentioned, forming the corpus luteum, as we just saw in the previous picture, whereas the site that the egg was released from the follicle is another important function because there's some hormones associated with the corpus luteum. The infundibulum, let's move to the next part of the system. The infundibulum is like a funnel that you can think of as responsible for catching the egg that's ovulated from the ovary. In the human, we then have the oviduct, the fallopian tubes. In livestock, we call that oviducts. Those terms can be used interchangeably. The function or the purpose of the oviducts and fallopian tubes are to connect the infundibulum to the uterus, and that carries the egg. In the fallopian tubes or oviduct is where fertilization will take place. Now, the picture that you're seeing here gives you an idea of the system. I'm going to point out the infundibulum here, which is hard to see, but again, it functions like a funnel to be able to take the egg, and then you can see the fallopian tube oviduct as I'm placing my cursor. One of the things that's unusual in this photograph is a follicular cyst. A cyst is developed here, which can impede the process of reproduction and is a problem in livestock. But the purpose of this slide is to be able to give you an idea of what the system looks like in its natural setting. Now, one thing that is different with livestock is that human female has one main uterine body. It's designed for a single organism, a single fetus, a single baby. Where when you're looking at livestock or other animals, the uterus can be shaped a little bit differently. For instance, in the middle of this slide, you'll see that the diagram is the shape of a sow. This is also true for a dog or a cat. And the reason why the uterus is divided into two distinct horns is the fact that it produces multiple organisms. A cat's going to have 4, 5, 6, 7, kittens. Same thing for a sow or a dog. So it's designed for multiple births, multiple organisms during birth. The mare, horse, or the cow, or the ewe, the sheep, it's designed with a main uterine body with two distinct uterine horns, and it's shaped to accommodate doubles or 2 or 3 type babies within the uterus. Continuing on, the purpose of the uterus. You've heard the uterus. The uterus is the part that contains the baby. It does help with transporting sperm, because remember, in the fallopian tubes of the oviducts where fertilization takes place, not in the uterus. It does, once fertilization takes place and the fertilized embryo is embedding itself in the uterus, that's where the animal fetus will grow during gestation. Remember, gestation is the time that the animal's pregnant. Another purpose of the uterus is to expel the fetus during parturition being birth. The part that protects the uterus, sort of like the front door, is the cervix. That's going to close off the uterus from the vagina. It's located in between the uterus and the vagina. That's the cervix. It's normally closed. It opens during parturition or during estrus when the animal's in heat to allow for sperm to pass through. The purpose of the vagina is the part of the organism that emits the male organ of copulation. That's where semen is placed naturally. In artificial insemination, that may be different, but naturally that's where semen is placed. The bladder is an accessory organ located beneath the vagina, and as you probably know, it is the area for urine storage. The vulva is an interesting part. It's the external genitalia. It's one of the ways to be able to determine sex in livestock at early age, because that feature is present in the female maybe before the male's parts are extended from the body. An example of what a vulva looks like, this is from a cow. That's the external genitalia. Functions of the female: ovulation, where an egg is released from the ovary, caught by the funnel, the shaped organ, the infundibulum, as we mentioned earlier. Here you can see 2 ovaries that are superovulated. These were superovulated in embryo transfer process to expel more than one egg at estrus or during ovulation, which is part of estrus. Estrus, again, is the heat period, the time that the animal is receptive to breeding. Now, unlike human females, livestock animals have to be in estrus before they will mate. Human females are different. In livestock and other animals, they must be in standing heat or standing estrus. That's the word that we use to be able to go through the process. Gestation, again, is the time that the animal is pregnant. Parturition is the term that we use when the animal expels the young, and that's the part at birth. Lactation is where the animal produces milk to sustain young in mammals. You can see what the system looks like. This is a bovine tract with the placenta. You can see it near the top of the photograph. You can see a developing fetus, and that's what it would look like inside the reproductive organism of a cow. Ovulation rates, again, ovulation is how many eggs are produced. As we discussed earlier, cow normally, in most cases, not in all, will ovulate 1 egg during estrus. A sheep, 1 to 3. A pig can ovulate up to 20 eggs. Not all of those will be fertilized, but can ovulate up to 20 eggs per estrus. The horse typically with 1, human with 1, and the poor hen is going to ovulate 28 eggs per month. It's going to ovulate 1 egg on average every 26 hours for high-producing hens. Here's some reproductive terminology. As you probably have heard before, cows are going to be producing a calf by calving. Goats produce a kid by kidding. Sows are very interesting. They produce a pig, and we call the process of giving birth farrowing. This slide shows some information on the gestation and lactation periods. A cow is normally in gestation 283 days or 9 months, and will provide milk until they're weaned. And you can see the features here, or the data here, for the dairy versus the beef. Pigs will have a gestation of 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, or 114 days. The estrus period in length is 16 to 18 hours for the cow. That's how long they're in heat, how long they're receptive for breeding. You can see it does change based off of the species. There's no estrus length for the chicken or for human females, because they do not have to be in estrus to be able to mate or try to reproduce, where it's not the case in livestock. The estrus cycle is different than estrus. Estrus is the time that they're receptive to breeding, but the estrus cycle, is the time from one heat period to the next. For the cow, that happens every 21 days. That's an important term to be able to remember. The cow is going to come into heat every 21 days unless it's bred. That's true for the ewe and the sow, very, very similar. The mare, the horse, very, very similar as well. Hens do not go through an estrus cycle. They'll ovulate every 26 hours on average for high-producing hens. And a little bit later, we'll discuss the male reproductive tract. But as of now, this is the conclusion of our discussion on the livestock female reproductive tract. Thank you for listening today.